I want to talk a little bit about the Parsha and the birth of Yitzchak, a name that I'm attached to. And that is, it's very, very interesting that the announcement of the birth of Yitzchak occurs in two different stages, two different stories. One of the downsides of Parsha of the week is we often look at every Parsha like a self-contained universe and we forget about last week's Parsha when we're doing this week's Parsha. But in reality, you have to read the Torah like a continuous story. Now, the truth of the matter is, at the end of last week's Parsha, Avraham Avinu was given the commandment of circumcision at the age of 99. And Yishmael circumcises at the age of 13. And Avraham's name is changed to Avraham, and Sarai's name is changed to Sarah. And Hashem tells Avraham right then, you will have a son, number one. That son will be from Sarah, your wife, not from Hagar. And you will name that child Yitzchak. That's in Parshas Lech Lecha. So Avraham has already been told at the time of circumcision that Sarah will have a child whose name shall be Yitzchak. Now, this is very interesting. We find, in other words, that Yitzchak is the only one of the Avos whose name was directly decreed by HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Right, Avraham was named by Terach, so we don't find. Hashem changed the name to Avraham. Yaakov was named by his parents, and then he got the name Yisrael from God. But Yitzchak's whole name is from God. Now, what is the significance of Yitzchak? Yitzchak means he shall laugh. He shall laugh. So Chazal say this is a remez to the Liasid Lavai that eventually, in spite of all of the suffering of the Jewish people, eventually, as the saying goes, he who laughs last laughs best, that eventually we will have sechaik, we will have laughter, just as Shir Hamalos says. We say it every Shabbos from Tehillim. Oz, when the redemption comes, Yimalei sechok pinu, our mouths will be filled with laughter. Now, therefore, it's important to note that contextually, there are 3 or 4 different mentions of laughter with the birth of Yitzchak. There is Avraham laughs when he gets the news. Sarah laughs when she hears it from the angels. Sarah laughs when she has birth. But then, ultimately, it is the redemption, the laugh of the final redemption, that is the most significant. So, here's the thing. Avraham already knows he's going to have a child from Sarah. Now, 3 days later, begins this parsha. Avraham is 99 years old. He's recovering from a bris. He did the bris to himself. And we know that the 3rd day after circumcision is when you're the weakest. That is why Shimon and Levi wipe out the city of Shechem, the 3rd day of their circumcision. So HaKadosh Baruch Hu wanted Avraham to recover. Hashem didn't want there to be guests that Avraham would take care of. So what does Hashem do? Hashem makes it boiling hot, a piercingly hot day, on the assumption that there'll be no travelers that day. And therefore Avraham will rest and have R&R. But what happens is Avraham is so eager to bring people under the Kanfei HaShechina that he waits outside in the hot sun, waiting for Orchim. Of course, the question, why didn't Hashem know all of this? It's a kind of a strange situation. Hashem says, I'm going to make it hot, so Avraham will stay inside and there'll be no Orchim. But Avraham is still waiting outside, so Hashem is stuck. So he has to send Avraham 3 Orchim so that Avraham could engage in hospitality. And the 3 Orchim are actually 3 angels who appear as Bedouins, as traveling Arabs. And as Rashi explains, why are there 3 angels? Because each angel has a unique mission. Angels cannot do more than one thing. One angel is to communicate to Sarah the news that she's going to have a child. The other angel is to heal Avraham, right? Is to give Avraham a refuah. A 3rd angel is to destroy Sodom. And the angel that gave Avraham a refuah will also be the angel that goes and saves Lot, because that's called one mission. That's the mission of saving people, whether it's saving somebody from an illness or saving somebody from Sodom. Right? So we have 3 angels because there are 4 different tasks that need to be done, but two of those tasks, healing Avraham and saving Lot, are considered to be one. And the Bedouins, Avraham doesn't know they're angels at this point, so he makes food for them and he goes to all sorts of trouble for them, etc. And they tell him, "Where is your wife Sarah?" And they say she's in the tent. And they tell, "Your wife will give birth to a child in a year, or a year from now will be a child," etc. And Sarah hears it from behind the tent, and it says she laughs because she says, "After I am withered, can I have rejuvenation of flesh? And my husband is old. My husband is old." And what do the angels say to Avraham? "Why is Sarah laughing and saying that I am too old?" I'm sorry. Sarah said, Sarah said, "After I've withered, shall I have rejuvenation of flesh? And my husband is old." The angel said, "Why did Sarah say she's too old?" So the Gemara in Bava Metzia remarks that Sarah didn't directly say she was too old. She said, "My husband's too old." Why did the angels change it to Sarah said, "I'm too old"? So the Gemara says, we learn out of halacha here, that for shalom bayis, to make peace between a husband and a wife, you're allowed to lie. The angels deviated from the truth because maybe if they would have quoted Sarah's words that her husband is too old, maybe that would have hurt his feelings. And to make shalom between ish v'ishto, you're mutter to deviate in that way. Okay. Now, here is the problem. There's a lot of problems with this story. First of all, why is Sarah laughing? She does not believe that God could give her a child. Second of all, this is not the first time. Hashem already told Avraham that he would have a child from Sarah. And our safe assumption would be that Avraham told Sarah about that prophecy. If that's the case, this is not a surprise. So number one, even if she didn't know, why does she think that God can't do it? And number two, she knows because Avraham had a prophecy from Hashem that presumably he communicated to her. Now, the truth of the matter is, there's a third question. Avraham laughed. Avraham laughed when he was given the news at the end of Parshas Lech Lecha. Why does Avraham get a free pass for his laughter, and Sarah is criticized for her laughter? What is the difference between Avraham's laughter and Sarah's laughter? The Torah uses the same word except for masculine and feminine. In the case of Avraham, it says Yitzchak, and in the case of Sarah, it says Vatitzchak. The translation is exactly the same, except one is he laughed, one is she laughed. So why does Avraham get a pass? So there's a lot of difficulties in analyzing the idea of Avraham's laughter, Sarah's laughter. Didn't Sarah already know the story, etc.? But I first want to focus on a preliminary point, and that is, why is the birth of Yitzchak announced in two different stories? We have Hashem communicating to Avraham at the time of the bris, and then we have the angels communicating to Avraham and Sarah 3 days later, giving the same news. Why is this a play in two acts? Hashem to Avraham at the time of the bris, and Hashem through the Malachim to Avraham and Sarah 3 days later. We know this already. Everything was said already. So on this point, I want to share with you a very interesting machshava from the Shem Mishmuel that's actually very practical in many, many ways. All of us know that Avraham's dominant midah in his avodas Hashem was his midah of chesed, loving kindness. Avraham represents compassion, benevolence, kindness. We know that Sarah represents what is called gevura, inner strength, discipline, understanding that sometimes you can't compromise. It is essential that as wonderful as chesed is, it be counterbalanced with a certain level of restraint. Even the most common level. You want to give chesed to your child, so you let your child stay up, all night, eat unlimited amounts of candy. What looks like chesed could actually be destructive, unless there's boundaries, unless there's discipline. The chesed needs to be balanced by inner strength and firmness. And that is why Avraham was incapable of expelling Yishmael. Yishmael was his son. How could he expel Yishmael? But Sarah understood that Yishmael would be a totally destructive influence on Yitzchak and on Klal Yisrael. That's later in the Parsha. And therefore, it was Sarah that said, we have to banish Ishmael. Avraham couldn't do it on his own. And Hashem said to Avraham, everything your wife Sarah tells you, listen to her voice. So you understand, chesed is a wonderful, wonderful quality. The most wonderful of qualities. But it needs to be grounded in a sense of gevura. By the way, this is why the Akedah, the sacrifice, is treated as the trial of Avraham. It is not treated as a trial of Yitzchak. Yitzchak actually resembled his mother. Yitzchak represents gevura. So for a person with gevura to give his life for God is not such a sacrifice. That's his nature. My nature is, I do whatever God commands. But Avraham, who served Hashem through the act of loving kindness, the Akedah didn't compute. How could the God who exemplifies kindness and mercy and compassion tell me to kill my son? Avraham had to go against his nature. Yitzchak giving his life was in accordance with his nature. So obviously the nisayon, the trial, the challenge, was much greater for Avraham than it was for Yitzchak. Right? So Avraham represents chesed, Yitzchak represents gevura, and in a marriage you need both facets to exist. But a true unity in marriage is not simply where one spouse is this and one spouse is this. True unity occurs when each spouse incorporates the goodness of the other. So Avram needs to incorporate Sarah's gevura. Sarah needs to incorporate Avram's chesed. The unity of husband and wife occurs when each one can incorporate within their personality the dominant good aspects of the other person's personality. Avram has to become more disciplined and focused as a result of Sarah. Sarah has to become kinder and more of a giver as a result of her connection to Avram. It's only when the Torah talks about creating a child, that a man shall leave his father and mother and cleave unto his wife and become one flesh. Right? That's the lashon of the pasuk. V'hayu lebasar echad. And as Rashi explains, the child that is born is a combination of the father and the mother. But in order to have the child, we have to be like one flesh. Each one incorporates the aspect of the other. Of course, you have to be careful. It reminds me a little bit. Forgive it's a tiny bit off color, but okay, well, I'll mention it. There was a very famous ballet dancer, Isadora Duncan, who was a bit of a flirt, and she was sitting next to George Bernard Shaw, who was an intellectual but a curmudgeon, kind of a sour guy, and she flirted with him, and she said, "Oh, Mr. Shaw, or if we marry to each other with my beauty and your brains, we will have the most marvelous children." So George Bernard Shaw says, that would be true. But what if we have kids with your brains and my looks? He says, then we're going to be in trouble. So the idea that each one has to incorporate that of the other can sometimes work in a destructive way. Right? I take my wife's bad habits. She takes on my bad habits. Well, there you kind of have marriage in hell, where each one gets dragged down because of the other one. But in the ideal way, in the holy way, each one grows by developing within themselves the capacities that they get from the other person. So this is what the Shema Shmuel says. Before Avraham and Sarah could have a child, Sarah needed to incorporate the Midah of Avraham, and Avraham needed to incorporate the Midah of Sarah. So, Act 1 is Avraham incorporates the Midah of Sarah by doing Bris Milah, because Bris Milah is an act of Gevura, inner strength. In a way, it's the opposite of Chesed. If you recall, the beginning of the Parsha says, Hashem appears to Avraham at the plains of Mamre, outside of Hebron. Now, Mamre was one of Avraham's Canaanite friends. And Rashi brings the Medrash that why did Mamre have the merit that God should appear to Avraham in Mamre's property? So Rashi says, because Mamre was the one who gave Avraham advice to go through with the bris. Meaning when Hashem told Avraham at 99, circumcise yourself, Avraham was wondering, should he do it or not? Mamre convinced him, and therefore he was zocha that Hashem appeared to Avraham in the chelak of Mamre. Now the question is, what on earth does that mean? Hashem told Avraham to take a bris, so Avraham's going to not do it? And he needs the Canaanite Mamre to convince him? So if you look in the Sifsei Chachamim and you look at the commentaries of Rashi, they all explain Avraham for sure was going to do a bris. There's no question. Hashem says do a bris, he'll do a bris. That's not the question. But Avraham's debate is, should I do it publicly or privately? Why? Because here's the problem. Avraham's whole sales pitch, so to speak, the way he brings people to God, is by emphasizing Hashem's kindness, Hashem's chesed, Hashem's benevolence, Hashem's rachamim, that God is of infinite kindness. But all of a sudden, Avraham is going to do something that on a superficial level looks like an act of mutilation. Remember, he's not 8 days old, he's 99 years old. And Avraham is afraid. If I show people that God sometimes requires sacrifices and pain and suffering, that's going to destroy my whole ability to communicate the message of Hashem to the world. So I got to do it because Hashem says I got to do it, but maybe I should do it privately. Mamre convinced him that you need to show people there are two sides here, that life and relationship with Hashem is not all touchy-feely, peaches and cream. Yeah, God is a God of chesed, God is a God of love, but sometimes there are demands, sometimes there are sacrifices, sometimes you got to go ahead and submit. So Mamre, so when Rashi says Mamre gave Avraham the Eitzah, the advice to do the bris, the Sifsei Chachamim explains not that Avraham wouldn't have done the bris, but Avraham would have done the bris privately. Mamre convinced him to do it publicly. So you see that bris milah, in many ways, is not a chesed act. It's an act of gevura, inner strength, discipline, submission. So Avraham could not have a child until he incorporated within his chesed the gevura of Sarah. That's Act 1 at the end of Lech Lecha, where he gets the message from God at the time of the bris milah. Conversely, Sarah cannot have a child until she incorporates the chesed of Avraham. And what was that? Hachnasas orchim, taking care of these strangers, preparing food. So the Shema Shmuel says the reason why the birth of Yitzchak is bifurcated, so to speak, in 2 acts, is Act 1 is Avram incorporating the Midah of Sarah through Bris Milah. Act 2 is Sarah incorporating the Midah of Avram through Hachnasas orchim. And it is only when The chesed incorporates the gevura, and the gevura incorporates the chesed. That we have a total unity of husband and wife, in which a child, a holy child like Yitzchak, the progenitor of Am Yisrael, is able to be produced. Right? This is a thought of the Shem Mishma. But now let's focus on the second question. That is, hey, Avraham laughs, and he gets a free pass. Sarah laughs, and all of a sudden she's criticized. Do you lack faith? Lama zed tzachak Sarah. Why does Sarah say she can't have a child? Hayipale me Hashem davar? Is there anything that's beyond God? And not only that, but Sarah denies laughing, which is also a question, right? She says, I didn't laugh. Oh, she did laugh, so she's compounding the offense. She laughs, and then she lies. Right? What's going on? So the emes is this. The emes is, if you look at Targum Onkelos, you see a very fascinating thing. You know, Onkelos, who was Onkelos? Onkelos was a convert. He was a Roman who converted to Judaism. He was actually the nephew of a Roman emperor. And by converting to Judaism, he was putting his life in danger, because in those days the Romans would kill converts to Judaism. And he became a Talmud of Rabbi Akiva. And we know that he translated the Torah into that was spoken even in Eretz Yisrael during the Second Temple period, and that is Aramaic. Right? To this very day, we have a law of the Chachamim that one should try to learn the Parsha of the week, reading each verse twice, Shnayim Mikra, and reading Onkelos. Now today, of course, Onkelos does not help us as much as it used to be, because we don't get Aramaic. In other words, it's almost the opposite. The purpose of Onkelos was to give people a translation of the Torah. Today, it's virtually the opposite. When people read Onkelos and they don't know what Onkelos means, they look at the Hebrew and the Chumash to figure out what Onkelos means. So that's why there are poskim that say that Bisman Hazeh, I'm not poskim, I'm just mentioning an opinion. Bisman Hazeh, one could be Makayim Shnayim Mikra V'Echad Targum by reading a translation like Art Scroll, because even though it's not Onkelos, but it serves the function of Onkelos in giving you a translation. Again, you can ask your local Orthodox rabbi, may or may not be me, whether that's proper. Okay. Now, one thing about Onkelos, though, is there are other Aramaic translations of the Torah. Targum Yonasan ben Uziel, Targum Yerushalmi, but Onkelos is very different. The other Targumim bring in many, many midrashim. Onkelos is a very literal translation of the Torah. Onkelos is very deep, actually, but you wouldn't know it. Onkelos is a word-for-word translation. One of the most important features of Onkelos is that Onkelos has a strong tendency, which a good translator should have, to be consistent in his renditions. When the same word is used in different places, Onkelos will almost always, use an identical Aramaic word. On the few occasions, now of course you wouldn't know this unless you know Onkelos well, but on the few occasions where he deviates, that's an immediate question. Why? And one of the very interesting cases where Onkelos deviates in his translation of an identical word is with Avraham and Sarah. At the end of Lech Lecha, when it says Avraham fell upon his face and he laughed, Yitzchak, Onkelos puts it v'chadi. Chadi in Aramaic means he rejoiced. In the case of Sarah laughing, it says v'chayach. Chayach means she laughed. Meaning, why is the Targum changing it? It's the same word, except masculine and feminine. Vayitzchak, vatitzchak. The answer is, the Targum is trying to answer a question without asking it, and that is, how come Avram's laughter is okay and Sarah's laughter is not okay? Right? Why is that so? Answer, because there's laughter and there's laughter. There is laughter out of joy, out of simcha, And then there is laughter out of skepticism and derision and, hey, are you crazy? You're nuts? So the Targum tells us that Avraham's laughter was not criticized because it was the laughter of joy. Sarah's laughter was criticized because it was the laughter of derision and skepticism. And that's why the angels say, why is Sarah laughing? So the question, though, is, Sarah Imenu was a great, great tzaddikus. So why would she be skeptical? And how could she deny it as well? How could she lie? So the Ramban is really masber with the Mahalach of Unkelos. And the Ramban says the following. Avraham hears the message directly from God. You will have a child from Sarah. So Avraham believes it. And he laughs out of joy. But the Ramban posits, now this is a little unrealistic, that Avraham never communicated that message to Sarah. Ramban says, well, he was so busy getting ready for the bris. Oh, honey, just forgot to tell you, type of thing. That's a little dochek, but it says Avraham didn't tell her. So the first time she's hearing it is from the angels. But she doesn't know they're angels. They look like Bedouins. She's making food for them. Avraham is making food for them. So she has the right to be skeptical, meaning Avraham hears it from Hashem. He believes and he laughs and he rejoices. Sarah, who didn't hear that message, and she's what? She's 90 years old. And according to some Chazal, but in fact this is actually Shver, the Pasuk says over and over again that the great miracle of Sarah was her age. That's what it says. She's old. But the truth of the matter is, Chazal say there was a much bigger miracle than her age. Chazal say Sarah didn't have a rechem. She had a hysterectomy. She didn't have a womb. Believe me, that is a much bigger miracle than having a child at 90, is to have a child without a rechem. Why the Torah only emphasizes her age as the miracle is a good kasha. But still, Sarah has every reason to believe she's not going to have a child. And 3 guys off the street say, Sarah will have a child. So her laughing was not sinful. Her laughing was not a disbelief, the Ramban says, in God. But she just didn't think these guys were anything. So the question becomes, so why do the angels criticize her? The Ramban says, a very important yesod, a beautiful yesod, that when somebody gives you a bracha, you never know if they are the conduit of divine blessing. You answer amen. You don't scoff. Some bum off the street gives you a bracha, take it. That bum might be an angel. That bum might be Eliyahu Hanavi. You don't know. So yes, of course, if Sarah would have heard it from Hashem, she would have believed it. That's not the question. She's hearing it from 3 guys who look like Ovdei Avodah Zarah even. But the Ramban says, Afilu hachi, accept the bracha. What do Chazal say? Chazal say, Al tihi birchas hedjeit kala b'einecha. Even the blessing of a very simple person, don't treat it lightly. Amen. Ken yehi ratzon. May it be. Reminds me a little bit of a story involving the Rogatchover Gaon, who was a very super genius, but very acerbic, very sharp. That a man came to him and asked the Rogatchover for a bracha. So the Rogatchover didn't like to be a Rebbe type figure, so the Rogatchover says, I don't give brachas, whatever it is. So, I'm not a Rebbe, he said. I'm not a Rebbe, I don't give brachas. So the person said back to the Rogatchover, Chazal say, even the bracha of a simpleton should be taken seriously. Kal v'chomer, someone like the Rav. If even a simpleton can give a bracha, kal v'chomer, you can give a bracha. So the Rogatchover said, why should I give you a bracha through a kal v'chomer? Give yourself a bracha without a kal v'chomer. You're a simpleton. In other words, you can give yourself a bracha directly, a birchas hedjet. Me, it's a kal v'chomer. It's already one step removed. Okay, this was the Rogatchover. They tell a story, and again, some people are going to tell me that story is not true. I know this is discussed in various message boards, so maybe it's not true. But I'm going to say it anyway, because I have a sheet that even if stories are not true, if they illustrate a point, they're worthwhile to share because they teach a certain point, and some say it is true, that a man in Bnei Brak had a daughter, and the daughter was getting a little older, and she still did not find a shidduch. Let's say she was 30, let's say. Right, in the Haredi world, that's, pretty old. So he goes to the Stipler. The Stipler was Rav Chaim Kanevsky's father, the Kehilos Yaakov, a great, great God. What's interesting, when I was growing up, Rav Chaim Kanevsky was known as the Stipler's son. Today, Rav Chaim Kanevsky is known as the Stipler is known as Rav Chaim Kanevsky's father. Whatever, but the Stipler was a big, 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 big guy. He was a brother-in-law of the Chazon Ish. He married the Chazon Ish's sister. That's why the Chazon Ish was Rav Chaim Kanevsky's uncle. And since the Chazon Ish did not have any children, so essentially Rav Chaim Kanevsky had two fathers, really. He had the Stipler, of course, his father, and the Chazon Ish was also like literally a second father. It was like mamish, like two fathers in that, two gedolim as fathers. But the man went to the Stipler and said, "I'm so worried about my daughter. She's not zocha to a shidduch. What's going to be?" So the Stipler said to him, "When your daughter was born, did you make a kiddush celebrating her birth?" So he said, "No, I didn't. The minhag was not always to make a kiddush for a daughter. That was more tsanua." So the Stipler said, "Aha, that's your problem." So the guy said, "Why? What's the shaykhus? What's the problem?" He said, because at a kiddush, everybody goes over to you, maybe 100 people go over to you and say, Mazel Tov, may you be zocha to take your daughter to the chuppah. And you even get tired of hearing it. One after the people just say it. It says, but one of those people might have been the emissary to bring down a bracha for you. And you did not have that opportunity. Maybe that's what happened. That there was somebody who had that koach to give you a bracha. So the man then said, "So what should I do?" He says, "Make a kiddush now, and maybe someone else will have that koach of bracha." And the story goes, he made a kiddush, and people asked him, "Why are you making a kiddush?" He says, "Oh, it's in honor of my daughter's birth." "Oh, do you have a new daughter?" "No, it's the one that's 30 years old." And the story goes, as stories typically go, a week later, she got engaged, etc. You never know who gives you brachas. Take them seriously. Now this explains why Sarah was not really lying, because as soon as the angel said, why did Sarah... See, if you ask yourself the question, when did Avraham and Sarah realize these are supernatural angels and not people? I think we could say Miss Tavra, they realized that they were angels when the angels were able to reveal what Sarah was thinking in the privacy of the tent. When they said, why is Sarah laughing, saying that she's too old to have a child? At that point, the veil was lifted. At that point, the masquerade was over. At that point, they realized these are angels. So when Sarah said, I didn't laugh, she's actually right. She says, I certainly did not laugh because I disbelieved God. Meaning, I didn't laugh because I thought God couldn't give me a child. I laughed because I didn't think this was a message from God. So, in a sense, everybody's right here. On one hand, she's wrong because she should have said Amen to the bracha. On the other hand, she's right because she didn't think it was coming from Hashem, and therefore she's not really lying, she's explaining herself. Hagam, that it's still not considered to be proper. But based on this idea, it does turn out, according to the Ramban's understanding, that Sarah was totally unaware that she would have a child until this happened, meaning Avraham, who was already told this at the end of Lech Lecha, at the time of his bris, Ramban actually posits, did not communicate that to Sarah. Again, it's a little bit of a dochak, especially the Ramban's reason. The Ramban's reason was he was just too busy for preparing bris milah, because remember, Avram's bris milah was a big deal, because he didn't just circumcise himself, Yishmael was circumcised, but more than that, all of Avraham's male servants had to be circumcised. Now we're not given a number. How many servants, how many avodim did Avraham have? But it may have been in the hundreds. So the day of the bris may have been a pretty busy day. There may have been hundreds of people that were circumcised. So the Ramban says, too busy. It's a little bit of a dochek. This is a pretty important message. God tells you, you and your wife are going to have a child. Oh, honey, sorry, forgot to tell you. It's a little dochek. But some understand it in a deeper level. Some understand it that when Hashem gives you a message and did not give you explicit authorization to reveal the message, prophecies are to be kept private until you are given permission by Hashem to reveal it. That's a bigger chiddush. It's not that he simply forgot to tell Sarah. For whatever reason, he was not allowed to tell Sarah. Maybe because of the Shem Shmuel, that Sarah couldn't get the message until she did an act of chesed. We find a similar idea. We're going to see it in 2 weeks. That when Rivka, Yitzchak's wife, is carrying the twins, and she doesn't know they're twins. She thinks it's one person, and every time she walks by a base avodah zarah, one twin is punching to get out, and every time she walks by a place that serves Hashem, the other one, and she's confused. Do I have a schizophrenic kid? Do I have a kid that's Rasha, tzaddik? And she goes, what does the pasuk say? She goes to seek the counsel of Hashem. And Chazal say that actually this is Shem, the son of Noach, that is the spiritual leader of the time. And Shem says, this is not a split personality, this is not a schizophrenic, but rather there are 2 different nations in your womb. And V'rav Yavod Sa'ir. And eventually, B'yacharit Hayamim, at the end of days, the older shall serve the younger. That's referring to Esav eventually being subordinate to Yaakov. Now, you'll recall, again, I'm getting ahead of myself, but you will recall that Yitzchak wanted to give the brachos to Esav, and Rivka had to engineer a ramaos, a deception, so that Yaakov got the brachos. Now I'm going to talk about this much more when we reach Parshas Told Us, but I just want to bring up one idea. The question would be, why does Rivka have to engage in deception? After all, she has a nevuah from Shem ben Noach, V'rav Yavod Sa'ir, that Esav is supposed to be subordinated in some way to Yaakov. And the answer is, Rivka never communicated that to Yitzchak. Yitzchak was not aware of that prophecy, and that's why he wanted to favor the Bechor. Again, there are many other questions I'll address. But, so it's almost like revenge of the woman. In other words, Avraham is not allowed to tell Sarah that she will have a child. She has to hear it from the angels. Rivka is not allowed to tell Yitzchak that the older will be subordinated to the younger. Because there is this concept that nevuot, prophecies, are limited to those who receive them, unless Hashem specifically gives you authorization. So that could be, again, that's not what the Ramban says. The Ramban says that he didn't tell Sarah because he was too busy, but some learn he didn't tell Sarah because he was not authorized to tell Sarah. And nevuos are private until Hashem gives you rishus. Yeah.
So like the Nevi'im have the authorization.
Well, yeah, because if you look at it, the prophecies of the Nevi'im are stated, go and tell the people. So go and tell the people is telling you to reveal it. But if something is a message from God, and God does not say go and reveal it, you're actually supposed to keep it confidential. Okay, we'll stop here. Have a good Shabbos.
Thank you, Rabbi.
Thank you for listening to this Awesome Eich production. To find out more and to partner in our mission, please visit ohr.edu.